Live from Utah's Wasatch Front, the pulse of the Mountain West, where the issues that shape your life meet the truth that sets you free. Across Utah, across the Republic, and around the world, welcome. This is KMMU.
Hello, folks. This is Talk with Jon. I am happy to be with you today. Grateful to be here. Looking forward to the show we have today. Let me get my flag a little closer and a little bit better arranged for us, for the audience's viewing pleasure, because I'm in my office and everybody doesn't care. I don't have an awesome background yet. Someday that'll happen. But nonetheless, all right, let's get to it. Folks, this is kmmu.org, Main Street Media, Utah. Looking forward to being here with you today. I am your host, Jon, of Talk with Jon, and look forward to interacting with you and bringing you two great guests over the next 2 hours. So let me first start off by giving out the show prayer and the show mantra. Obviously, the show prayer and the show mantra are from the bottom of my heart when it comes to doing this show. Do I live up to it all the time? I must admit, I don't. But it is what I attempt to live up to while I'm doing the show. And that's a little bit easier sometimes than, other parts of life. So I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra: where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be within. And that's, and I'm going to say within the United States and within your own community, within your own household, and within your own heart, folks. So let's get to it. I want to introduce my first guest, just a great man, a great American. He's here again with us, and we appreciate him being here whenever he can join us. Let me give a quick bio on him. And I'm going to read from his personal Twitter account. Christian husband, founder, president, and CEO of Invest USA, a nonprofit organization providing thousands of bulletproof vests for law enforcement officers. Now, and he also provides it for others as well, first responders and the military. So we appreciate him doing that. But let's be clear, he's given many, many, many thousands. Like, is it over 15,000 now?
17,000 now.
17,000. I'm not trying to sell you short, Michael.
Well, I'll just say a lot.
It's a bunch. All right. Well, let's get to it. So I put out, you and I shared with you there were a number of things that I wanted to cover. So let me just hit the topics that I want to cover, and then we'll kind of go from there. The shooting of the Venezuelan drug boat, stabbing in Charlotte, North Carolina. New York Times and the left media has yet to cover it. In fact, I might even see if I can quickly bring up Elon Musk's tweet about it, but like zero coverage from the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC. I mean, it's ridiculous. Bottom line is it's ridiculous. Maxwell says nothing happened with Bill Clinton and nothing happened with Trump. Did Maxwell actually share anything? And was it a good move or a bad move to interview her, according to mainstream news? She also said Epstein didn't keep a client list. So then what else are we going to look into? What's going on with Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and the former Missouri AG? Bondi Legal Action Company sold border wall material, or the border wall material that was sold. They may be taking legal action against them. There are rumors that Dan Bongino has already resigned, has handed in his resignation, and they're just waiting for the clock to tick on that. Is there any truth to that? Then the John Bolton raid on his house. Now, this is a few weeks old, but I think this is worth talking about because some of my friends out there that are on the left are like, well, this is just political targeting. I'm like, kind of sounds familiar to me if that's the case. But if that's the case, that it is just political targeting, okay, then I have a big problem with it, because just because they do it doesn't mean we should do it. And then the last thing is, I want your thoughts on President Trump announcing that he is looking to go to Louisiana with the welcoming, or excuse me, to New Orleans, Louisiana. Let me be more clear. With the welcoming and open arms and thank you-ness of the governor of Louisiana. And then he has also talked about going to Chicago quite a bit. And everybody in Chicago and Illinois, as far as in their government, meaning the governor and the mayor, are like, don't you dare come. No problem here. We love our murder rates just the way we are.
Love the way you put that, John.
Love the murder rates. But I mean, I wasn't too far off from what the Chicago mayor is saying. Stay away. We can take, we're fine with the crime problem we have.
That's correct. You hit the nail on the head. And all the other ones are great topics. There's a few more we'll add on top of it before the time runs out.
Okay, so let's start right there. Chicago and Louisiana. I think it's a very good dichotomy of the way this is being handled, not just by Trump's handling it kind of the same way, but it's interesting how those on the left are handling it versus those on the right.
Well, it's the same play that we did in D.C., and it's the same map. We've refined it a little bit, but it was the same strategy. And what is that strategy that we implemented? First of all, we had a staging area. Staging area has been set in Chicago. Of course, it was vetted out confidentially, so that everybody would know where it was at. So that doesn't help us with it from a security standpoint, but it is what it is. It's in a military installation on the Great Lakes, and we have our military installation set and ready to go to house what we bring in and to prepare to be used as a staging area for the missions going out. And
okay, so what do you
for
mean
logistics.
by bringing in? Do you mean by I'm assuming you mean by the National Guard members that they will be bringing in? Is that what you mean?
Well, actually, what I say for bringing in is all the illegal immigrants we're going to be picking up. Because you remember now, they don't want us there, supposedly, okay? So you can't just go in there and then start making arrests and say, oh, well, we thought this was worked out. What do we do with them now? Just tie them to trees? Well, that's a pretty good idea if you ask me, but won't fly too well, I think, with some of our activist judges. So we've got to have a place to house them, or we're in the process of transitioning them and deporting them. And that will be done from a military operational basis. Now, you asked a very valid question. So what did we do in DC and what are we doing similar in Chicago? You notice in DC what we first implemented, you brought in roughly 250 to 300 federal agents, either ICE agents, U.S. Marshals, FBI, combination of all the above. We put roughly 250 to 300 extra agents out on the street immediately. Then after a couple of days, the Guard came in, and what we called overwhelming force. And when they came in, what did they do? They made sure, first of all, we're going to make sure they're armed so that they can protect themselves. They're not coming in to make arrests, but they are coming in to defend federal agents and to defend federal property and make sure the areas are secure. And we do that with what we call overwhelming force. Then we tie in local agents, federal agents, and local police officers into each one of these teams, so that when arrests need to be made, goes into two classifications now, John. If it's a federal arrest, i.e., it's an illegal immigrant we're arresting for deportation, ICE handles that. If it's somebody that's being arrested because it's a local felon, then local authorities take care of that particular issue. Or if there's a disturbance, you go in on the disturbance. Local handles that disturbance because there's probably local laws that are being violated. So we've got the system down. We've got it pat and ready to go. And yes, we're moving on the way. Now, somebody said, well, when exactly do the National Guard get there? We're not going to reveal that just yet because I'm sure there'll be some welcoming parties when they get there. So we'll just catch them off guard and we'll just show up. But we've already started the first phase. We have the location and we have the staging area already set. We have 250 federal agents, I think 250 to 300, who are either there or will be completing getting there within the next 24 hours.
So are we doing Louisiana at the same time?
We're in the process of planning that one out in Louisiana as well. Yes, a little bit. When you say the same time frame would be a better definition. So the same time, to me, the same time is the same date, same hour. No, but same time frame within a matter of short period of time in between. Somebody says, "Why is that?" Let me give you a little statistic that nobody is aware of. On the global scene, America is ranked in the very top tier of the most violent countries in the world. I don't know if people realize that or not, but that's just the way it is, okay? Now, we have 4 cities: New Orleans, Chicago, Detroit, and DC. If you remove those cities from the numbers that are run, graphics, we become almost the safest country in the world. Total reversal from 4 cities.
That still leaves Los Angeles, Austin.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some other Memphis. That leaves some other Democrat strongholds that are
New York
and New York, right? That are known
because it shows you how bad these cities are. If it does a total reversal on the global scenario, global scene, by just removing the crime from those 4 areas. Notice what we've done. What cities have we already accomplished it in? We've taken care of DC. That's the first. So where do you think we're headed from here? Remember, what was the strategy? What if we told the American people, we're not going after Democrats. We're not going after blue cities, sanctuary cities. We're going after crime. Now, it just so happens that the majority of the crime is in sanctuary cities, Democratic controlled blue areas, etc. But that is not our focus. Our focus is we're going where the crime's at. If there happens to be a red city or a red state that has skewed numbers as well, shall we say, we're going after that one as well. We're going to make sure we're dealing where the problem is at. And that is what you'll see us lining up. And we're going to move very quickly on that. A couple other states, cities you didn't mention, Portland is another important one. So is Seattle. But we're going to make sure that we believe the Constitution guarantees the right to be safe, to be secure. And we're going to ensure that we've already been putting out the pressure again to blue cities and their elected leaders, not the cities themselves, but the elected leadership in these blue cities. Why is it that we're specifying blue cities? Because we usually don't have a problem in red cities. And let me tell you what I mean by that. When we tell a red city, the numbers are getting a little bit skewed here. What are you doing about it? Their first response is, what can we do about it? Can you help? Boom. We have a great working relationship, and we do what we need to lower those numbers. In blue cities, you got a problem there. So, you gonna do anything about it? No. So, there's a little different attitude with the blue city issues than with the red cities. But here's what we have issued a mandate, shall we say, or an edict would be a better word, across the country to cities, period, but especially blue and sanctuary cities. We're warning you once again. We took action in DC. We're going to clean up this issue nationwide. You have a choice. You either want to do it, which in that case, if you can't, you need our help. We are happy to step in. Call 1-800-HELP, and that's a fake number, by the way. But, we'll be glad to make sure that we work together to make sure that your citizens are safe and secure. Or if you won't, be advised, we will. And that's the edict that has come out. That's where we're headed right now. And we're going to make sure we live up to it.
Okay. So in Chicago, where they're not welcomed by the mayor and by the governor.
Correct.
Now let's be clear. There's multiple videos of, people that live in Chicago saying, yes, please please send help. Please send the National Guard. We want them here. So many of the citizens, I would bet you that the majority of the citizens would like to have them there helping. So what does it look like in a situation like that? Because in DC, Donald Trump can put, and the federal government can pretty much put them anywhere they want to, because it's a federal city, right? In Chicago, if they don't want them there, what can be done? Because not everybody is wanting them there. Now, you said that they're going to go and assist federal law enforcement, that they're going to, meaning the guard. You mentioned that they're going to send ahead of time ICE officers and other FBI and others, obviously, probably DEA and so forth, Homeland Security. They're going to send those folks out, and then they're going to guard federal installations. So, would the U.S. Guard just be there on the federal grounds, or would they be able to leave the federal grounds? Want to know what that looks like real quick.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because let's analyze what the opposition is saying and what's been falsely put out there. The opposition is saying you can't come unless we welcome you. You can't use National Guard troops. They're under our authority. All right, let's take it the way it is. Technically, they're under that state's authority, but we don't have to bring in Illinois' National Guard troops. We could bring them in from any other state we want to. So that doesn't keep us from bringing in National Guard. And that's a technicality. Actually, ultimately, the way the Constitution is written, if the president enlists them and federalizes them, that's the end of the state input, okay? Boom. They serve at the pleasure of the commander in chief. So Illinois, if we wanted Illinois guards there, when we decided we're going to use them, we would simply federalize them. And sorry, Governor Pritzker, you have no say so in the matter. We need to clarify that actually. Do you want to pick that fight? Not really, when you've got plenty of other people to choose from. You understand what I'm saying? We're going to pick a few fights. We're going to pick the important fights that benefit the American citizens, not the political garbage that's out there right now. Now, what's the second thing that they're trying to do? You can't do that. That's unconstitutional. 10th Amendment says that you can't have armed or your military on American soil serving or exercising law enforcement provisions. That's true. But did you read the whole 10th Amendment? Because it gives two other provisions in there. First of all, it says there are two other exceptions to the 10th Amendment. First one is if there are enemy combatants or adversaries on American soil, you certainly can use military assets to do that. Imagine what would have happened in World War II had Japan and Germany landed troops on American beaches and we said, oops, well, we can't bring American forces here because they're not allowed on American soil. So I guess the cops and you local farmers will have to deal with these soldiers that are coming. Garbage. Okay, now, how do we qualify underneath that? Do you notice when the president took office back in January? Shortly thereafter, he declared the cartels were enemy combatants. He declared the gangs were enemy combatants. He declared human traffickers as enemy combatants. Do you not think we have plenty of enemy combatants now on American soil all across this country? Of course we do. So that automatically meets that provision. That alone settles the issue. No need to further discuss it. But what's the second provision? The second provision says that there either have to be enemy combatants or the president of the United States, i.e. the commander-in-chief, has to declare that there is a national emergency. It doesn't say what the national emergency has to be. That is at the sole discretion. Notice that word, sole discretion of the president and commander-in-chief. So what is the second thing the president has done? He has determined that the crime elevations have gotten so high, people are so unsafe, there's such corruption, that he has declared, if you will recall, that you notice the mainstream media didn't run this for weeks as a head story. I think they ran a small clip on the back of a page, but the president has declared a national emergency in this country for crime. So he's met the second provision. So that having been said, if the president wants to, he can send active duty military personnel fully armed to make as many arrests as he wants to for anything he wants it to be done for. That's the bare bottom line that they don't want you to know. But the president is sensitive to the perception. We do not, the American people do not want a military dictatorship. It's never been our intent to do that. So, how do we accomplish bringing down crime in the easiest and most fashionable way? And it's very simple. How did we get into this problem to begin with? Let's make sure our listeners and our viewers understand this. When Joe Biden took office, we got roughly 1.4 million sworn officers across the country, okay? But you remember that around the time he was taking office, you had Antifa, you had Black Lives Matter, you had defund the police movement, you had if you don't take the COVID vaccine, you're fired. You remember all of that occurred all within those 4 years. What did it do when Joe Biden left office? We had roughly around 689,000 to 700,000 officers. That's roughly 50% of our force was lost. Now, you remember, John, when we first started talking back in January, I was very clear. We do not have the personnel to clean up this country. We've lost too many. It's a recognized fact. Any experienced law enforcement officer will tell you so. So how do we do it? We're going to have to partner with our military assets under the following guys. We've done this all along. Why do you think this stage is being set? We've done it all along, but we're only partnering for one reason. Bring down the crime. At the same time, bring up the number of officers we have on the street. Do whatever you need to do to restore our numbers. Do what we can to bring it back up. It should balance out once we've got crime under control. And remember what we're talking about with crime under control. We're not talking about we're going out on the street, so all the criminals run into a basement, peer out every morning to see if you're gone or not. And then when you're gone, they all come back out and nothing's been accomplished. We're going door to door. We're making sure that we grab all the illegal immigrants. When I mean illegal immigrants, criminal illegal immigrants. That's our first priority. Our drug traffickers, our human sex traffickers, our terrorist organizations. We're making sure and we grab them and deport them. So they won't be there when we leave, okay? They'll be gone. That will reduce that element of crime. Second thing that we're doing is in partnership with law enforcement, local law enforcement, is we're getting a list of everybody that's U.S. citizens that have jump bail. And we're going and saying, okay, you want to play the game? Fine. You won't go out and terrorize the citizens until your trial comes up for your first crime. You're going to jail. And you're going to sit there until that trial comes. If you're innocent, you leave. If you're guilty, you're going to spend the rest of your time in jail. That takes them off the street. Then the third element that we were going after is juvenile crime. Remember, that's becoming a new animal that we're having to deal with. And that is this aspect that you're 14 to 18, you can even murder somebody. But at 18, you're out and your record is expunged, and where you're quote unquote, according to the Democrats, being given a second chance and get to turn over a new leaf. The fact of the matter is, John, that never happens. That is unrealistic thinking. What happens with those young people is they become better criminals than they've ever been in their life. They lead you a life of crime. It leads to more destruction. Our motto is simply this now, John. If you're old enough to do the crime, you're old enough to do the time, period. And so we're going after that aspect, and we're sending a message to our young people. And believe me, we're getting their attention. Don't be buying this stuff about, hey, why don't you come over here and do this crime for me by an older criminal. Worst that can happen to you is a couple of years, and we're going to make it so worth your while when you're out. You'll be set for life. They're beginning to understand, oh, no. It doesn't work that way anymore. You want to commit that crime, you won't have a life at the end of it.
And if you do get out, you will be set for life. You'll be set into crime, and so we'll have you do more of it.
Exactly, no question. So those are the aspects that we're taking. Then consider what we just talked about, how some of these key cities are creating such inflated numbers for us because they have lax laws, because they don't. Our our jurisprudence system needs to be revamped. It's interesting. We'll talk about this during the show, but the poor girl that was killed in Charlotte, stabbed in the neck by the criminal, by the assailant there. He'd been in and out of jail 14 times. Not in and out, kind of like, oh, he was a drunk, so he could get out after 24 hours. No, we're talking about major crimes. The crimes he should have never gotten out the first time. Early release was the word they used. 14 times he was released early. They're calling now for that judge to be investigated, and that judge should be held accountable. Maybe that judge should face criminal charges for putting a criminal back on there and allowing them to kill that poor young girl who came over from Ukraine. So,
wow. If we were to start putting criminal charges on judges for them releasing early, that would change things a bunch.
That's what we're talking about, John.
Wow, that would be huge.
So at least everybody now
Part of
understands
me is a little concerned
what's
about that,
working.
but overall, I mean, the principle of what they have done, yeah, becoming more accountable for letting criminals go, absolutely. Okay, let's come back to the Venezuelan drug boat, or the excuse me, come back to the stabbing. We've got so much to cover, but I first want to get let's hit because we were talking a little bit about the crime and crime syndicate. Uh, let's talk real briefly about the Venezuelan drug boat, because it's 4:29 already, and we've covered pretty much one subject, touched on two. So let's real quickly hit the Venezuelan drug boat. It's out in international seas. There's a bunch of people on the left. They're like, why didn't we give them a warning shot? Why did we just go ahead
We did.
What?
We did. We shot one across the bow. They chose to ignore it.
Well, that just goes to show what has been shared in the mainstream media and what has not even been put out. So we put one across the bow. They ignored it. Sorry.
And when I say ignored it, they didn't just kind of wave. They put full throttle. They were getting there behind, trying to break through the line. So what else? What were the other options? Let them go to American shores and continue to unload drugs. Remember, it wasn't just drugs. They had armaments, and they were gang members from Trinidad. That president, I don't like to use the word president. He's not really a president. But Madera has made a public commitment to do everything he can to overthrow the United States government and to oppose us in any form or fashion. We're going to let him do that unchallenged and unopposed. Would we have done that with Hitler or anybody else? Of course not.
No.
We put it to the bottom of the ocean, and it sent a very strong message. And here's what the mainstream media is not telling you that you need to be aware of. It wasn't just a message to Madera. Here's the message we're sending. You know what? Instead of just dealing with the crime when it gets to our shores, we're going to go after its source. So for all you drug dealers and all you cartels worldwide, for all you terrorists worldwide, for all you people who think that you're going to pick on Americans and take Americans hostage or kill Americans, guess what? We're coming for you. Oh, we're going to get into major wars. No, we're not. We don't need wars because our military is so specialized and is the best in the world, better than Russia's, better than China's. We can go in and accomplish the mission within 24 hours. So we're going to go ahead and find where the source of the problems are coming from. We're going to go in, we're going to terminate them. We're going to eliminate them. You say, well, we're violating their sovereignty. What do you think they're doing to ours by they're trying to kill all our citizens by sending their junk over here to the United States? We're going to go to the source.
Monroe Doctrine. We'll deal with our hemisphere. You've heard me say it many times. Let's pull the troops back. Hey, we're in our hemisphere. We're taking care of ours. Mr. Venezuelan, whatever you happen to be, narco terrorist. He probably is the biggest pimp of them all, or whatever, or run by the pimps. Bottom line, sorry. We gave you a shot across the bow. You went full throttle. We're going to put your boat down at the bottom of the ocean. Oh, and by the way, that's not the only one we can do. And remember what happened in Panama back in the 80s?
Yeah, I sure did. Manuel Noriega remembers that as well. I don't remember if he's still sitting in prison in the U.S. or not. Is he?
I don't recall. If he's still alive.
I don't remember if he's still alive or not.
Yeah, I have no idea. Well, let's go back to, so the bottom line is, it's good to put and it was interesting how the Mexican president responded to that. She's been steadfast, like, oh, we're going to stand up to the United States and we're going to stand up to Donald Trump. And she sees what happens. She's like, how can I play ball with you guys?
Because, see, the message of what we just talked about, it is part of the Monroe Doctrine. We have no intention of going and sending troops and having endless wars in countries. But let me just use Venezuela. You want to keep us out of your presence off your territory? And you can do anything you want to with your drugs. Just don't send them to the U.S. Just don't try to destroy our people. You send it to the U.S. and we will do a precision strike. And where it's manufactured in your country, and we'll eliminate the problem from its source. And that goes to every other country that's listening, all across the globe. Why do you think Mexico suddenly responded? Ooh, on second thought, hey, we're friends. We're in this together. What can we do to help? Because we mean business now. We're going to protect America. We're going to protect its integrity. We're going to protect its citizens. America first. We mean that, and we're going to demonstrate it.
Manuel Noriega died in prison in 2017. Thanks,
Okay.
Dwayne, for sharing that with us. All right, let's go back to the stabbing on the subway. To me, it was a terrible thing. It's a terrible event. I feel really bad for the young woman who passed away. On a small level, I even feel bad for that man, because the bottom line is, I do think he has serious mental problems. His mother spoke about it. His mother came out on it. But what bugs me is, had the races been reversed, that would have been played everywhere in the United States. It would be played 24/7.
No question.
And it would have been like, how terrible is the white male, the continuing, and they probably would have found a way to make him a Christian white male, just like they tried to do with the trans shooter 2 weeks
Right.
ago. They want to control the narrative. They want to, so it doesn't meet their narrative, and that's why it hasn't been talked about. And I'm attempting to see if I can find Elon Musk. But go ahead and
And
comment.
while you're doing that, let me throw out a quick update on it. The AG's office, Pam Bondi, has now said we will charge this person federally. As well, the FBI is handling this criminal event. Why are they handling it? Because of what I just said. He had been sentenced 14 times, an early release every time. Very little of the time that he was sentenced. Back out on the street 14 times. We're going to make sure that doesn't happen again, A. And B, it opens up a broader discussion I had on a national show this morning, John. Where are the men? Why would anybody stand by and let somebody be attacked? And the question becomes very simple. Because part of their strategy in destroying this country, they've determined to effeminate men, to make sure that we're no longer men. And how have they done that? Our educational system, you can't even decide you're a man anymore. Not. They tell you might be a girl. You're not sure which one you are anymore. Okay, that's what they're doing to our young people. The mainstream media and to our prosecutors. If you get involved, John, if you decide to defend a woman, tackle somebody for stealing a purse, etc., we're going to charge you, not the assailant. You're going to get charged. You're the one that's going to go bankrupt having to defend yourself, even if you do get off okay. And so we've sent a very strong signal. Men, just sit down and shut up and don't do anything. It's time we reverse that. It's time that we accept the role that God gave us. God made men stronger for a reason. He made women the weaker sex. I don't care if they want to hear that or not. That's the truth. The reason why he made them the weaker sex and gave men the strength is because we're charged in Scripture to protect our women. And quite frankly, we've left that responsibility because suddenly nobody wants to be a man anymore because they're scared of our government system. Well, it's time the government get behind and you make strong men again. Strong men make strong leaders. They make strong communities. They provide national defense. They make life worth living and enjoyable for the rest of us. So men, quit sitting behind and hiding behind something and acting like you're a woman. I was going to use a couple other words, but I can't use that on the air. So, men, start being men. That should have never happened to begin with. They should have come to her defense. I'm not saying they could have saved her life, but they should have tried, and they should have tackled that guy. And like I told the host this morning, if I'd have been there, at least there would have been no evidence as to what happened because I would have destroyed. They wouldn't have found the body after I got done with it. But it's about time that we take the role back that this mainstream liberal democratic ideology has tried to place upon us of making men feel like they can't be a man and they should somehow be some kind of a little wimpy woman.
So, real quickly, this was shared by Elon Musk. 0 AP stories on this deadly attack, 0 PBS stories, 0 NY New York Times stories, 0 NPR stories, 0 Wall Street Journal stories, 0 BBC stories, 0 CNN stories, and 0 Washington Post stories on that. So it just goes to show how terrible that is, that you don't have any uh any of those any of those organizations covering this. It should be covered, and because I guarantee you, and I just pulled up the video on what happened with on the train, and unfortunately, I need to go back in. My parents are. I need to go. I'm not seeing any. You know, there's 4 guys surrounding him, and unfortunately, there's a few people that he goes past. I don't think they noticed that it happened. But one thing that comes to my mind is Daniel Penny. You know, what if someone would have stood up and tried to do something? Well, what if another guy would have had a knife and it would happen to be a white guy, and he would have seen that that's the guy had cocked back his arm. I mean, it reminds me of a police officer that shot a black young woman because she had cocked back she went so far, she had a knife out. I think she was under the age of 18. If I remember correctly, she was not adopted. She was in the foster care system, and she was about to go after a girl. She cocked back her arm. It showed in the video, and then it started going forward, and she had a knife. And that's when the police officer was like, don't do it. And that's when he shot her. And he was called a racist for shooting her. Who did he happen to be defending? Another black girl. He showed up on scene, and that guy's life, he was lucky, but I mean, he's still going to be called and considered a racist in many areas. Many people are not going to see that he was defending another black girl. He's got to live with that. So that's one of the reasons why this is a problem. And you're right. We have got to come out. We've got to have all of America, including women, say, it's time for men to be able to stand up. It's time for us for men to be armed and to arm themselves. And if we see something bad about to go down, you defend those that need to be defended.
I like what you said, John. You see, we have to have government leaders that are willing to back their people in doing the right thing instead of opposing
the Charlotte mayor that came out and said, well, he had some, I don't want to, what was the statement? I don't want to, basically, I don't want to hurt people's feelings and stop mental illness. Instead of saying this was a cowardly act, this was terrible, you want to know
totally separate issues.
You want to know why it happened on your watch, Miss, and I believe it was a Miss Mayor. It's because of that statement right there. You are condoning the action. You're endorsing the action, not condoning it.
Correct. And that's got to change. And, we've talked about things that we're doing when we first started the show, within cities. We're talking about changes to be made, changes that need to be made in our judicial system. But one of the key changes that need to be made is in our government leadership and in the mass media. It's time to quit allowing them to dictate how we as a society, we as American men behave. Enough is enough. Take back America. And we can't do it a moment too soon.
All right. Let's head on to, we still have Maxwell, who said Bill Clinton didn't do anything, and Trump didn't do anything, and that there was no client list. So first of all, bad mood, good move, going and interviewing her. Secondly, what's believable? I mean,
nothing.
Right, and that's the problem. Is the new?
Well, that's the problem with her, but not the problem with the overall case. Let's unpack this real quickly.
Okay.
First of all, it was not a bad move to interview her. You say why? Because America knew she was involved and she had made the claim, which was true. She never had a chance to tell her story. She told her story. Her story was full of crap. Okay. So, are there any deals to be cut? Is she going to get time off her sentence? She's going to get a good little extra cookies in her little packages? Of course not. She was of no value, period. But what is the positive in all this? Is it gave courage if people said, hey, if we're talking about this, we're the victims. Those are the ones you need to be listening to because it happened to them. You need to listen to what they said. And we need to validate and verify. I'm not just automatically saying these victims are 100% honest either. But we have a starting point now. We have names, we have dates, we have events, and we can go back and cross-reference. If there's validity to them, we go into a full-scale investigation. If there's not, we move on. But now we're making some progress on this particular thing, and we're going to get it resolved.
Okay. So I remember you and I talking at the very beginning when Bondi released those binders all the way back then, saying, okay, great, we finally got some information coming out. Found out that there was a bunch of stuff that was in the FBI office in New York that happened to be under Comey and his daughter's control, shall we say. They were the ones that were in charge of it. And then come to find out through hearing through the grapevine, it sounds like some of that information may have been scrubbed of all Democrats and just left with Republicans and so forth. So, okay, what's happening there? And that'll get us into Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, and then hopefully we have a little bit of time for John Bolton.
Well, I mean, we'll wrap up this thing with the Epstein list. So now we're headed where we're supposed to be. Let's talk to the victims, vet that, and pursue the investigations as they need to be, because we know that people had certain control over those lists. They had control over the entire files. We know that the government has been corrupt. You can't guarantee that they weren't altered. So we're going to have to kind of ditch that and go to where the source is. Do we have a case? Which I personally believe, of course we do. And then we'll need to pursue it as aggressively as possible at this late date with law enforcement and do it the right way. That having been said, you get into what agency will do the investigative work, the FBI. Of course, we know the FBI is cutting loose more names now than I can keep track of because of the fact of their involvement in nefarious activities. What do you mean by nefarious activities? I find it interesting. Congress gets upset. We let a bunch of agents go who were involved in January the 6th. Why? Because they knew good and well those agents knew. They had the access to the information, that it had been a setup. It's interesting. The Department of Justice now, Ed Martin, is especially appointed by the president for one particular reason, to create a new division within the Department of Justice, that he is the Deputy Attorney General. He is second in command. And this agency, this section of the Department of Justice is to deal with corruption and politicalization and weaponization. He just announced yesterday, I believe it was, they're doing a full-scale investigation of the January 6th committee and to see why did they destroy evidence, because it is a federal felony to destroy anything without prior approval, authorization to destroy those records. They destroyed that. They withheld evidence. They did everything good, and it was all at the direction of Nancy Pelosi. So we're going after now to begin to find out exactly what kind of activities our law enforcement officers did that they weren't supposed to be doing when they were involved. But all that falls under the new director, Kash Patel. Kash is doing what he can, but he's become frustrated. It's very obvious. We're doing a lot of positive things. We're dealing with child sex traffickers. We're getting firearms off the street. But the bottom line is America wants to know, thank you for what you're doing today, but what are we doing to hold people accountable for yesterday's crime? Because if you can't cleanse the wound, the reinfection will occur. And so that has been the frustrating aspect. It's been very frustrating for Dan because sometimes there's not even honesty within the agency. One hand is covering up what the other hand is doing. And if you've been involved with law enforcement for a period of time, you get to the point where you despise when you see corruption within the agency itself. There's a question people have asked, is Dan going to hold on? I think, quite frankly, that's a good question for him. He is struggling with what he sees, what we're being able to accomplish. We brought in another deputy director the Missouri AG, very well qualified, very well capable. So that whole leadership, whether it's Cash, Dan, we've got extra people that can step in if it gets too frustrating. And I want to be very clear on the record. If it gets too frustrating and then a step down, I won't hold anything against him. I understand how frustrating it can be when you're trying
Okay,
to deal with
you
corruption
won't.
this magnitude.
I'm sorry. When both he and Cash Patel said there is nothing here, when it came to the Epstein files, I myself, I don't know how many text messages I got from other hosts that I've interacted with over the years, and other people just blew a bottom line, they blew a gasket. They're calling Dan
I was one of them.
Bongino and Cash Patel liars. So I'd say my concern for Dan, if I was Dan, my concern would be, I've got nothing to go back to. Well, maybe I can get begged for forgiveness, but it's going to be hard. He's burned a lot of his credibility. So what are your thoughts to that?
Well, quite frankly, I think you have a very valid point because it was very poorly handled. And I told you this when I was on your show right after that occurred. And what should have been said was it should have given a full transparency briefing to the American public. Here's the information that we have at hand that we can utilize to move forward with convictions. There's not enough here. Not saying that there is not enough that occurred, but enough evidence here that hasn't been destroyed, tampered, or altered with. We're going to either have to find it, recreate it, or we can't move forward with indictments based on what we have. But instead, the impression was this is all we have. This is good enough. This is all there is, and there's not enough here, and we're going to go ahead and move forward. And that's not the case. If that had been all there is, why would we have victims coming forward? None of their cases have been pursued.
Well, and on top of that, I mean, literally today, I've gone back and forth on texts with another radio host who I've had on my show, Steve Elkins, and he's like, I'm done with Donald Trump. I'm done with Donald Trump saying it's a Democrat hoax. He goes, bottom line is he's starting to look guilty to me.
Well, and I've had a lot of people tell me the same thing. And, I mean, it doesn't help with the fact that he had a friendship. We can't deny that. I mean, how do y'all see you think Jeffrey Epries got membership into the Mar-a-Lago Club? I mean, I think if you just walk in, John, and say, I'm John, nobody knows me, but I want to have a membership, it might be a little harder to accomplish than, it may seem. So, yes, there was a friendship there. Of course, we understand the explanation given. There was a friendship until discovered what he was all about, and then we cut him out of the club and cut him loose. Do you choose to believe that or not? That's up to every individual. But yes, there's some concern there. I think the American people have a right to be concerned. But at the end of the day, I'm very confident, and I will defend the president on this. I really felt like there was something that was there. It would have come out a long time ago. And even the victims, so far now, every one of them has said, no, he had no involvement at all. Doesn't mean he didn't know people, but he was not involved at all. Now, what Steve is saying, I can understand Steve's frustration because I think what I'm hearing from Steve, because I know who you're talking about, I know Steve, I think there's more than just frustration about Jeffrey Epstein. I think there's frustration just within the administration period. Some things have not been accomplished the way we thought they were going to be. Some things are being done that nobody knows about. And because they don't know about it, they assume nothing's happening. So I can understand the frustration period, but I would remind them this, and I would tell Steve if he were listening, out of all the administrations we've had in decades over the last 4 or 5 decades, I can't think of a one who's made more effort to try to get some things accomplished than this one here. And so certainly we are much better off than we were with Kamala Harris sitting at the helm. I can assure you of that.
Well, I think one of the things that Donald Trump was said, hey, with some of these billionaires and, multi-billionaire names, the economy could just totally tank if this information comes out. And then on top of that, it becomes a worldwide issue. My opinion is I'd like to think if it was me, I would have said, damn the torpedoes.
I think most people would prefer that. And what the president said, he was dead on. Okay, I know enough about it. Yes, it could create tremendous economic situations. It could create tremendous world conflict situations because of the stuff that would be disclosed with governmental agencies, intelligence agencies across the globe being involved. But you know what? The only way to deal with sin, John, the only way to deal with infection is you got to remove it, regardless of how painful it is. We don't look at a wound and say, oh, this is a surface wound. It won't take much to clean up the infection. We can fix that one. Oh, you got cancer. Ooh, I would have to go in and dig deeper. That's going to be more painful. I think I'll just sew it back up and leave it alone. You do that, you're going to die. So sometimes we have to take the road less traveled or the road more painful to ultimately get to where we need to be.
Speaking of Steve Elkins, he just sent me a text at 4:49. So just a few minutes ago. FBI official fired, escorted out of the building after leaking audio release of him claiming that, and I'm not sure what it claims, but he says, "Here you go. Release the Epstein files after Trump's term is over?" Question mark. Maybe, but I seriously doubt it. It's bad news for both sides. So, and that's from, and he's bringing that up from freedomsphoenix.com. I've not heard of that website before. All right, let's do this. Okay, so I think we've covered Dan Bongino, Kash Patel. Let me ask you this: in 2 months, do you think both of them are still there?
I don't know whether both of them are still there or not. I think Cash will stay for a while. I think Dan, right now he's doing some really tough soul searching because of based on what he's seen, and he doesn't feel like it's been moved forward the way it should be or quick enough. And I sympathize and understand that, and so I support him either way. But no, it's just what you just heard about Steve said about the Epstein files. I think we've been barking up the wrong tree sometimes. It's not about Epstein, it's about the victims. The victims need to have their day where they give full testimony and evidence of what happened to them and who did it. And those should be pursued. If that means it's a list, if that means we don't get everybody, at least we get people that we know were involved because it has a way, John, of happening. You go after a couple, they scoot on a couple others. Usually at the end of the month, instead of the day, the end of the month, usually wind up netting them all anyway.
All right, let's hit John Bolton raid on the house, on his house and his office. Was it politically motivated? Is there anything there?
It could appear to be politically motivated, but the answer to that is no. The answer is John Bolton, the information that they received, there is classified information that was recovered. There's a lot of records and files that have never been transmitted that were there. And it's not just that, it's his financial records, the money that he has received from various parties. The question that is raised is, was he selling national security secrets, and was that involved? Now, do we have all the information to say yes he was or no he wasn't? No, but that was the reason for one of the reasons for the raid, and that was a valid reason.
Okay, so did he have classified documents?
We have found classified documents, is what I have been told. Yes,
from what you've been told. Okay, so let's go with that theory. If he would have had classified documents, is he legally allowed to have those?
No, of course not.
In his possession?
No. The only person who can have classified documents is the President of the United States, not even the Vice President, only the President of the United States.
Didn't he claim that Donald Trump shouldn't have had classified documents?
Oh, he did. Here's the problem that you have.
He was, and his book is In the Room.
Right. And you're bringing up a very poignant point, John. And that's this, is if you go back over the last 10 years and you look at Bolton's position, he has been an extremely vocal critic and hater of Trump. I mean, that's well known. So if you want to accuse somebody of setting you up or saying that you did stuff when you didn't, probably you'd have a lot more credence if you hadn't went out and prior to that done so many things to try to discredit that person. It makes it look like you're trying to shift the blame back for legitimate stuff that's been found. But we could have this argument back and forth. You could say, well, yeah, they brought a handful of classified documents and stuffed them in there when they were making the raid. I'm sure that's what John will claim. Uh, but the bottom line is this: it was a valid reason to do a raid and to seize records. Where does it go from here? We're both going to stay tuned for that one, John.
Okay. Well, our other guest has yet to pop in. So, what else do you want to throw at us?
There's so much. Let me give something we can all laugh at. Let's live and make it a little lighter conversation on one thing. I think it's ironic that Kamala Harris, ex-president, gets 6 months. Okay, just the law is. You can change it only by one way: executive order. Well, Joe Biden extended hers from 6 months to 18 months. No rationale, just she gets 18 months. Of course, what's the benefit of having a protective detail? I don't have to drive anymore. I don't have to pay for my gas. It's just a lot of real perks to that. So the first thing that President Trump did is
And
why?
it makes you look a lot more important and a lot smarter than you really are.
Yeah. And so the first thing that President Trump did was why? I can see no justification. I'm going to reduce it to where the law says it is. You get 6 months and that's it. I find it ironic that the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, and the mayor of LA said that that's our girl. Okay, she's a California girl. She's an LA girl. We're going to allocate resources that they don't even have. Their crime is just through the roof. We're going to pull cops off the street, whether the California Highway Patrol coming out of the governor's mansion, or whether they are LAPD detectives, protective detail, whether they're coming from Los Angeles. And we're going to put together our own team and give her protection from us anywhere in the country. They'll follow her everywhere. I think it was ironic that the police union in LA said, no, you're not. Our people, we have a union clause against that. We'll go on strike if you're going to do that. So Karen had to back down. Karen Bass had to back down. But Gavin Newsom says, I'm still the dictator for California, and we're pulling highway patrolmen off the road, and we're going to make sure that little Kamala gets everything, her little security detail, whether you like it or not. I just find that's just amazing. It's amusing to me that one could have one of the worst crime rates in the country in their state, and they want to give protection to somebody for what? We couldn't find any rationale for the Secret Service to do it. What rationale did they find that we didn't?
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And yes, I was rather happy when I heard that had happened. We've got our next guest that has joined us. So Michael Letts of investusa.org. Folks, go to investusa.org. They've given out over 17,000 bulletproof vests over the years. And Michael Letts is the CEO, founder of Invest USA. Michael, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here. We look forward to having you back soon.
God bless you. God bless America, John. Keep up the good work. We sure do need you.
I'll do my best, my friend. Take care. Talk to you soon. Thank you. All right, folks, that was Michael Letts. We're grateful that he was able to join us today. We look forward to our next guest. I'll be introducing him momentarily. But first, since it's the top of the hour, I'm going to give out the show mantra and the show prayer, as it were. So we'll start with the show prayer. And let's also just restate, folks, thank you for tuning in to KMMU.org, Main Street Media, Utah. I am your host, John of Talk with John, and I'm looking forward to being with you for the next hour. That was Michael Letts that just was here, and I will be introducing our next guest momentarily. But first, I want to give out the show prayer and the show mantra. Now, I must admit, it's not how I live every moment of my life, but especially when it comes to doing this show, It is what I keep in mind, and I try to live by this. I hope my show is a gift back to my founding father. Excuse me. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra: where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty, and the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. Now, I want to introduce my next guest, Joel Skousen. Joel Skousen is the editor, founder and editor of the World Affairs Brief. Let me bring him live. There we go. Joel, thank you for joining me again this month, second Tuesday. Looking forward to having you on. We've got a number of topics to cover. Joel Skousen is a political scientist by training, specializing in philosophy and law and constitutional theory, and is also a designer of high security residences and retreats. He has designed self-sufficient and high security homes throughout North America and consulted in Central America as well. He has a book out, Strategic Relocation, which I have. In fact, I have all of Strategic Relocation, North America Guide to Safe Places. Let's see, how to improve a high security shelter in the home, the secure home. I have that one as well. Essential principles for constitution, essential principles for the conservation of liberty. He wrote that in 1984. I do not have that. And then in the works, the foundations of the ideal state. It's a comprehensive treatise on government structures and practices. Also, let's be very clear. He is the editor of the World Affairs Brief. You can reach out to him and go to World Affairs Brief to get a copy. I get that every single week, listen to it every week, or read it every week, or both. And that comes out on Friday. So, Joel, thank you so much for joining us here today.
It's good to be with you as always, John.
I want to throw in one thing that I didn't mention. I want to get your thoughts on this real quick. I mentioned in our phone call a little earlier today, I mentioned the topics that I wanted to go over, but there was one other that I wanted to throw in because I wanted your take on this, especially with your constitutional understanding. Trump having the National Guard go first to Washington, then he announced that he is looking to take them to New Orleans and Chicago. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it is a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, which essentially prohibits military intervention in domestic affairs. So this is being challenged in the court. He's going to have to defend it on that basis. It is true, obviously, that there is a crime problem in all of these blue cities. But crime is a local problem. It needs to be solved locally. I'm a little nervous about using federal troops to intervene because it can be used against us someday if a Democrat's in office.
That is my biggest fear, Joel.
Yeah. So as I say, the problem, of course, is people like George Soros getting prosecutors elected who will be permissive with crime. In Los Angeles, for example, they won't even arrest people for petty shoplifting. And so, retailers lose hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, actually, in Los Angeles. And the police, you can't even call them. They won't do anything about it. They're just too overwhelmed with other things. And of course, as your guest, just as I caught the tail end of that, they want to give protection, of course, to Kamala Harris when they won't give the citizens protection against shoplifting. That, to me, is typical of California.
They'll spend tens of thousands. This is a statement I like to say. What's good for me is not good for thee. And especially in California, in these blue cities, what happened on the Charlotte subway, I mean, no one there to defend themselves, and had somebody jumped in, there's a good chance, especially if it had been a white male, he probably would have been the one that would have been arrested, right? So the bottom line is, there's big concern. Now, let me ask you this: Do you think it was unconstitutional for Trump? So you feel it's unconstitutional for Trump to have the National Guard go to Chicago if the governor of a state is welcoming in the National Guard? What are your thoughts on that specifically? And then also, do you feel it was unconstitutional to have the National Guard in Washington, D.C.?
Well, Washington, D.C. is a different, it's a federal protectorate. And technically, Congress, administers Washington, D.C., but it's beyond Congress, the small details and things. So I think there is some room for federal intervention in D.C. as a federal city protectorate, but certainly not in Chicago or L.A. Um, uh, I think there needs to be some prosecution of state officials if they do not defend their people against crime. I think that's the appropriate thing to do constitutionally, is to go after the prosecutors and the mayors of those cities to make sure that they use due process to protect citizen individuals. And there are limits, on how much you can do that and to what degree. But when it becomes egregious like this, egregious criminal activity, and like this illegal who killed this Ukrainian woman in Charlotte, been multiple offenses, and he's been free on bail for many years. And Pam Bondi says he's never going to see the light of day anymore. He's going to go down permanently into the prison system.
Well, maybe if he'd gone, if we take these individuals that are doing these, starting out in the lower crime, put them in jail, keep them there for quite some time, maybe they'll cool their jets. Because what has a tendency to happen is there's the crime. People commit crime in their youth. Well, I'm going the wrong way. Trying to draw the graph, but in their youth, it starts in their mid-teens. It ramps up. They commit their crime, continue committing crime, and then it has a tendency to drop off in the late 20s, early 30s with men. So, listen, someone does something really bad, stick them in jail for a long period of time.
No, I don't think that's the solution, for the public to have to pay for these very expensive jail things for people. I have proposed.
What is the solution then?
The solution is related to 3 strikes and you're out. In other words, you have different limits for different types of crime. And for example, you may have 30 shoplifting. You may have 2 rapes. You may have 1 murder. You may have, 1 violent or, 15 violent crimes. And then it's a death sentence. In other words, you remove people permanently from society who show that they will not abide by the rules of society. And you give them enough chances to make sure that if there's an injustice here and there, it doesn't change the overall aspect. I mean, if a person's guilty of 30 shopliftings, they're going to die. Now, I'll tell you, when they get to 29 and the judge says, 1 more time and you're dead, they'll stop.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate deterrence, is the death penalty. And there's just no reason in society, but we're a soft society. We don't have the moral courage to change venues on people, send them back to heaven or hell, whatever they're going. It is a change of scenery. People don't die when they die. Their spirit lives on, and they will get ultimate justice on the other side, and it's painful. It's very, very painful. But I think that's the solution. You've got to have a certain number of times per each type of crime, and then you die. And that's a major deterrence.
I actually I've heard you say this before, Joel, and I really like it. And especially with rape and murder, I could see two murders possibly, and two rapes. I think what that does is it brings in the ability to have repentance, but the bottom line is you're gone after the you're done at the second one for sure. You're toast. See you later. Um, the Lord will work with you on the other side if He can work things out.
Yeah.
So I actually thank you for sharing that, because I agree. That's a fantastic way to handle it. All right, let's get on to the
Let me just emphasize, it's not the cruelty that's the point. It's the deterrence that's the point. Do we want to deter crime so that we don't have to continue to deal with it? That's the way to deter crime, is to have the ultimate penalty after a certain amount of violations.
yes, it is the deterrence, but it's also so it deters people from doing it the first time, and then you remove them if they give themselves over to doing those evils. They're just gone.
Well, it's not the first time. I mean, everybody gets a second chance, except maybe for a certain type of egregious murder, in your face murder. But we need to toughen up a society and reinstitute the death penalty. And once you meet those things, it happens the next day. There's no appeal. There's no going to the Supreme Court. Because if you've had 30 tries, if you've had 15, of this, or 4 rapes or whatever it is, it's over. You've been warned, and the judges need to really
I
sternly
would say
warn you.
two. I would say two. I like two rapes. You commit rape. It's maybe a chance for repentance. Maybe he said, she said, but the second time, see you later, gone.
Well, I think with rape, you have to be very careful, because rapes occur generally without witnesses. And that's why 95% of rapes never get prosecuted. It's a very sad statistic. But now that you have DNA evidence, and then if you have a rape kit and you have the DNA is in the vagina of the victims, that's a slam dunk. You're guilty of rape. And of course, then they could say that it's consensual, but so you have to have some pretty strong proof on rape. And that's why I would probably say 3 times. But in any case, that would need to be determined by society.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Let's get on to the other topics. So I'm going to run through the topics, and I'm going to let you start where you want to. And if you don't, I'll lead where to go. Is Trump's peace deal falling apart? The new anti-U.S. axis on display? A new threat to the Second Amendment? The U.S. and Venezuela exchange threats over the drug war and the shooting of the drug boat, downplaying the Chinese threat, and the war for and against mRNA vaccines continues. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with the Trump peace initiative. Trump keeps getting a reality check by Vladimir Putin. Every time he talks about peace, Vladimir Putin throws another 800 drones at Ukraine. It's very clear he has no intention of peace. I quote in the World Affairs Brief several people in the Putin administration saying that we're not going to stop. It's been very, very clear. And now Trump says, well, I'm going to talk to Vladimir Putin tomorrow, and we're going to have a deal. You see, when you want peace at any cost, you cease to become an honest broker and an honest diplomat. You've got to have certain standards, and that is that the victims of aggression are never rewarded. I mean, the victims or the perpetrators of aggression are never rewarded by allowing them to keep the fruits of that aggression. And as I had pointed out on your show and many other interviews, I'm one of the only journalists that's ever documented how the Soviets faked their own demise in 1989 and 91. That is, it was a phony fall of the Soviet Union, a phony fall of communism. And they prepared the way by putting the Russian-speaking people into the boundaries of Ukraine before the fall. It actually happened clear back in Stalin's time. They knew clear back then that they were going to use this phony reapproachment or rapprochement, as they say in the French, um, to get aid in trade. And in fact, Putin even admitted to Tucker Carlson in his famous interview in Moscow, and he said, the Russian hierarchy effectively initiated the fall of the Soviet Union. And it didn't mean anything to Tucker Carlson because he didn't remember that the official narrative is different. The official narrative is that it was a spontaneous uprising. Of course, it was spontaneous. They've always wanted to be free from Soviet things. But the other part of the narrative was that the Soviets couldn't control it. Well, they chose not to control it. They, in fact, gave orders. Erich Honecker said on his deathbed in Chile that Moscow gave me orders to stand down the Stasi and let the student protests go forward in Leipzig, where it all started. And even in the, Red Square protests with Boris Yeltsin sitting on a tank being filmed by the communist television station, the protesters looked around and said, "Where are the KGB? They've always been shadowing us." So this was a phony fall. And in the same sense, Viktor Yanukovych, the pro-Russian president of Ukraine, faked his own demise so that another false nationalist could get elected, Pyotr Poroshenko, who proceeded to antagonize the people in the Donbass, the Russian-speaking people. And sure enough, that very month, Putin started his invasion, his stealth invasion of Ukraine, and starting with Crimea in 2014. And so, I personally thought that Putin was going to go ahead and agree to a peace deal, and then he would, of course, violate it. He would use the interim time of peace to build up his armed forces. He was demanding, as one of his original demands, that the West stop all arms shipments to Ukraine. And that's a red flag right there, knowing that Russia would continue to rearm and rebuild. Well, Ukraine had to just sit there without any other arms resupply. But then he came up in his original proposal right before the Alaska summit between Putin and Trump and said, all I ask is that you give me the 4 regions that are Russian speaking here, and we'll have a ceasefire immediately. And I thought, well, he's really compromising because he is not saying that he wants the arms cut off now. But it comes to the fact that he simply, by omission, didn't mention it, but he still is demanding that. That came out last week, that is still demanding when you have peace talks and when you're getting a complete peace deal, that you have a cutoff of arms resupply to Ukraine. And then, even then, he has said, if you send in Western troops to Ukraine, I will consider that a violation of the agreement, and we will target your Western troops. And that, of course, could cause World War III.
Okay, there is also something else that I want to prove that Putin is totally not an honest actor. And that is something that you pointed out in your World Affairs brief that I didn't know about until I read it in your World Affairs brief, and then I went to the link. If I remember correctly, you have a link for it, or either you had a link for it or I had to go searching for it. And I forget who it was in Putin's entourage that went over to Alaska. They had a sweater that had CCCP on it. Why in the world, if you're an honest actor and you want peace and you are truly, as we're being told by the Colonel McGregor, that Putin's the one that's been had the terrible things happen to him, that Putin's an honest broker, and the West is totally wrong and evil, and they're the only ones that are evil. Why would you have someone in your entourage have CCCP on a sweater that they're wearing when they get off the plane? And I had someone be like, well, maybe he put that on right as he was about to walk out. That is a message.
Well, it's proof, in my opinion, is strong evidence anyway, that there was a phony fall of the Soviet Union. They still are communists. Actually, his his shirt says SSSR, which is Russian for CCCP, Communist Party of Russia. But in any case, I asked ChatGPT why would, and it isn't just anybody in his entourage. This is Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister. This is the guy second only to Putin in terms of foreign policy in Russia, and he's where. And AI says this isn't the first time he's worn the SSSR or SSSR T-shirt. He regularly wears it around Moscow, parading the fact that he's a communist.
Right. Okay, so forgive me. Can I get just a little bit of clarification? Is it USSR or is it SS, 3 S's and an R?
It's SSSR in Russian. That's it, the Russian letters for Communist Party.
Okay. I'm making a note. Please forgive me.
That's all right. It's the same thing as CCCP.
So ChatGPT says that he's worn that multiple times.
And not only that, they give the excuse. This shows that ChatGPT is not a neutral actor. They were already prepared to justify this by saying they're only displaying this not because they're communists, but because they're trying to be supportive of the old days, the nostalgia for the Soviet Union when they were a powerful union. So you see, ChatGPT already had the excuse in there. And they, of course, do not, when you asked, did the Soviets fake their own demise? Of course not, and they come back. So these people...
There is no way that would be in there, Joel. They would not allow that in any way, shape,
of course
or form.
Not. So this is not a neutral actor. These are programmed responses. It is not artificial intelligence. It is simply sophisticated programming.
I would concur with that. Any other thoughts that you want to cover on?
Well, Donald Trump. You see, Donald Trump keeps getting a dose of reality every time he talks about what happened after the Alaska summit. I have a good relationship. Putin came in there and he complimented, he praised, he flattered Donald Trump, told him you really won the election. He told him everything he wanted to know. So it completely turned Trump around. Instead of being hard-nosed, he said, Putin and I have a wonderful relationship. And then on the day that Ukraine was to meet with Russia, and they had another blitz of attacks on Ukraine, including at a couple of embassies. And this time they had attacks of 800 some on drones, and they hit the official government offices of the cabinet in Ukraine. So they're playing hardball. And I had in last week's World Affairs Brief, which your listeners can get a free copy of if they go to World Affairs Brief and request a sample. It's on the left-hand side, says request a sample, and you get the current brief. But as I say, Donald Trump was upset when the press asked him about it. He said, I'm not pleased or anything with this war. And then the next day he says, well, I'm going to talk to Vladimir Putin again, and we're going to make a deal. You see, he just doesn't learn. He is just set on deciding he's going to win this one way or the other. And fortunately for us, on the liberty side, Vladimir Putin keeps showing his hand. He's a ruthless dictator, and he's going for broke. They're trying to take back Ukraine, and the Baltics are next. It has nothing to do with the fact that NATO promised that they would not expand NATO 1 inch. They knew very well that Russia faked their own demise. They were handing Putin an excuse to complain about NATO expansion, but he didn't care if NATO expands. Remember, none of the communists were purged out of Ukraine, Poland, Romania, Czechoslovakia, any of the Eastern Union satellite states. None of the communists were purged. That means if they're members of NATO now, they have tens of spies inside NATO feeding Putin with what he wants to know. But he doesn't mind if someone joins NATO.
Do you think Poland is still a Russian satellite?
No. Poland is very much anti-Russian now. They did have a couple of puppet presidents. Lech Walesa, the leader of Solidarity, was a Russian agent. They started it, but eventually they purged from the politics anyway the pro-Russian elements out of that. Ukraine has not until um, Volodymyr Zelensky. Everyone prior to, including Timoshenko, who claimed to be a nationalist, was in fact a Putin puppet. And that's why there was so much corruption in Ukraine, dealing with Burisma and all the other energy people. They were all in bed with the Russians. So Zelensky comes along, and even though he was an immoral entertainer type of person, he is fighting for Ukrainian liberty now. And so you have to give him at least credit for that.
Anything else you want to hit before we go to the new axis against the U.S.?
Well, this refers, of course, to the major conference of the Shanghai Security Organization, and it's being, branded as an economic organization, and that's why North Korea, by the way, isn't a member of it, even though they're part of the alliance, building against the United States. They want to keep it looking as if it's economic. Now, this is a little bit different than BRICS. A lot of the BRICS nations are involved in the SCO as well, and were there. Some of them were an observer status. One of the most problematic observers at the SCO meeting in Shanghai was President Erdogan of Turkey. Here's a member of NATO attending the Axis powers for the next war, and he's always played both sides. So this was the most disturbing part about the attendance of those things. He was given an honorary banquet that praised Erdogan for being there, and India was also there too.
That I was going to say even more so than India.
Well, yeah, India isn't a member of NATO. India is part of the BRICS, but India showed that they're very much in the Russian camp. Now, remember, India has long been a Russian ally. They have Russian arms and equipment. And I just saw a very interesting interview with Ward Carroll, the F-14 radar intercept officer who runs a very popular blog, talking about the Pakistan-India armed conflict just a couple of months ago. And it comes to find out that Pakistan, using Chinese equipment, J-10 fighters and AWACS types aircraft from China, pulled off an amazing attack on India, shot down 6 of India's fighter jets from out of range. They didn't even see them coming. The jets, the J-10 Chinese jets, didn't even have to turn on their radar. They launched their missiles.
Wow.
And the AWACS aircraft directed those missiles to the 6 targets and killed them all. So I'll tell you, this was a real wake-up call for those of us in the military, to understand that China has now advanced weapons and AWACS type airplanes and can do what our F-35 does, which is, shoot from out visual range. Those aircraft that shot the missiles could immediately turn away. They didn't have to keep pointed in the direction to keep those missiles targeted to the aircraft, as we did in the F-4 and the F-14 when I was a pilot for the Marine Corps. Right now, the AWACS can direct and control those missiles and make sure they hit their targets, and can't be jammed. So this is very advanced stuff, and the Chinese have it.
What does that foretell for the United States going against China? Are we fighting on equal footing then?
Well, it's, China continues to steal technology and take technology from the West and advance, but this shows a capability, in fact, that is, we have that capability, but Russia does not. And so China is now superior in military force, except for nuclear weapons, to the Soviet Union. And that's why China and Russia know that they'll have to go at it after they get through taking down the West. That's what they intend to do in World War III. So clearly the Shanghai Security Conference was meant it's meant for a military alliance. Right now, they're pushing economic access to other countries through their Belt and Road Initiative. China is giving tens of billions of dollars to every country, third world country in the world, gaining access. And so a lot of people say, well, I'm going to move to South America because they won't be involved in World War III, but that's not true at all. China is very deeply invested in South America, in Panama, in Bolivia, in Ecuador, in Chile, and other places. And so it's not going to be safe for American expats down there in Latin America.
So if you're down in Panama, it's not a safe place for you to be.
That's right. Not in the long term, anyway. And a lot of people are enticed to go down there because of the dollar goes a long way in Latin America in most of those countries, and you have a lot of fairly cheap prices. Although Mexico City is getting very, very expensive now because of the expats down there boosting prices. Housing is now very expensive, and a lot of Mexicans are protesting the Americans being there because they're driving up the prices.
Well, more than just protesting, they're starting to attack some of the expats in Mexico.
Yeah, and some of the businesses that cater to the expats in Mexico City have been subject to riots and attacks.
Well, let's hit a new threat to the Second Amendment.
Well, a court recently, ruled that in favor of Massachusetts. Massachusetts after Sandy Hook had a assault weapon ban and a high capacity magazine ban, and the court ruled a novel interpretation this time, which is really a threat to the Second Amendment. And that interpretation is that since there are other alternatives to a semi-automatic assault style weapon and high capacity magazine, that therefore this is not about our restriction, or Massachusetts restrictions are not a violation of the Second Amendment. And that has been, runs counter to the Supreme Court decision backing the Second Amendment. So this is a new threat. It's a very dangerous doctrine. As long as you've got a pistol, you don't need a rifle. As long as you've got a pistol that has 9 rounds, you don't need a rifle that has over 10 rounds. And of course, they can say as long as you have one bullet in a single shot, you have your Second Amendment rights. So this is where they're going.
What do you think so that was the Massachusetts Supreme Court, right?
No, this was the appeals court.
Okay. So we've got the possibility that this can be turned over in the Massachusetts Supreme Court. And if not, it can hit
this is above the Massachusetts Supreme Court. The only other person who can overturn this would be the U.S. Supreme Court.
U.S. Supreme. Okay.
Excuse me, I've got to adjust my blinds.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead and get that done. It's getting it was getting right in your eyes.
Yes.
I totally understand needing to get that done. So what do you think is going to come of that? Do you think that it's going to be overturned when it hits the Supreme Court?
I think if it goes to the Supreme Court, it would probably get overturned. But we'll see. It's a new trend.
Okay, you said if it goes to the Supreme Court. So you think there's a possibility the Supreme Court might not hear the case?
There is a possibility. If they don't hear the case, it would be very bad for the Second Amendment.
Okay.
But with the current nominal Supreme conservative majority on the court, I think they would take the case.
I sure hope they will, because that when I read that in the World Affairs brief, I was like, holy crap, I have not even heard of this. So thank you for pointing it out. Should we go on to U.S. and Venezuela exchange threats over drug war? Definitely want your constitutional opinion on this one. U.S. and Venezuela exchange threats over the drug war. And so that was a couple briefs ago, if I remember correctly. And then we have what happened basically last week, the shooting of the drug boat from Venezuela. So let's just start with the U.S. and Venezuela exchanges threats over the drug war. the president of Venezuela has said, I'm going to do everything I can to undermine the United States. What are your thoughts?
Well, you know, Maduro is a communist, just like, his predecessor was a communist, Hugo Chavez. And, they met every year down in Sao Paulo with Lula da Silva, who ran the Marxist Communist Conference, sponsoring terrorism every year. These are declared enemies, and I think we have the right to go after them. I do think that there is a justification constitutionally to go after the drug cartels because they are heavily armed. They have as much arms as any armed force, though they may not be as much, and they are as ruthless. And I don't, think you need to, call them necessarily terrorists. They are an armed force that is invading the United States with drugs and defending that invasion with armed forces within the United States, even. All of your drug dealers are armed in the United States. And so I think the appropriate thing is for Congress to declare war on the drug cartels. That would make it legal. Right now, using, the superficial there has been no attack directly by the cartels against the U.S. military. Well, I can take that back. There has been a couple of instances cross-border in the southern United States where cartels have shot at border patrol, etc. But there is sufficient justification for Congress to declare war, and then it's full-scale war on the drug cartels, and Mexico can simply get out of the way. You can't, if you are caught protecting and saying you can't attack them on our territory, then that's a problem. And I don't think Mexico can justify that because you can't protect an enemy that is armed and is invading the United States with drugs and with arms into the United States. I think there is justification for going after them. Now, as I've covered in the World Affairs Brief, Mexico is being bought off by the cartels. There are whistleblowers coming out of the cartels say that every high person in Mexico gets approximately $100,000 a year from there to protect them. And that's why, President Sheinbaum is protecting the cartels. She's probably been on the take as well.
Well, either they're on the take or they're executed by the cartels.
Well, they prefer to have them on the take, and of course, the Latinos are very easily corruptible in that regard.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on the shooting of the drug boat?
Well, Mexico says that it was innocent civilians. Department of Defense or War Department now. This is very ironic, by the way, for Trump, who's angling for a peace prize, to change it to the War Department. Trump is just
okay. So I definitely want to hear your thoughts on the War Department, but to keep your thoughts on the shooting of that drug boat.
Hegseth says we have intelligence, we've tracked them, we have surveillance, we know who was on the boat, we know that they're part of the Sinaloa cartel, and I think that's right. I think they do. Nobody who's civilian has one of those high-speed, ocean-going speedboats with 3 or 4 high-powered Mercury motors. Those are all drug boats.
Those that look like 4 high-powered Mercury 200 horsepower engines that were on the back of that boat.
Those things are 60-mile-an-hour boats, waves permitting, and so I don't have any doubt that they were a drug boat. But the United States, Trump needs to go through the constitutional procedure and have Congress declare war on the cartels to make this legal.
So if it would have hit the United States waters, do you think it was okay then for it to be for the Defense Department to take action?
if they fail to stop and halt and try to do a runner, then you can target them. It's like the Somali pirates. I mean, that's not in U.S. waters, but they attack certain shipping and you can respond with deadly force. And the left is saying that you can't use deadly force. You have to arrest these people and try them. Well, where do you get the evidence? And all of that is very difficult in international courts when they're not in U.S. waters. And I think it's appropriate. These are very serious armed forces targeting the United States with illicit drugs, and I think it's appropriate to go after them, but with a declaration of war.
I would say the Monroe Doctrine applies to this. In my opinion, it's in it's in the Western Hemisphere. It's within our own hemisphere. It, you know, I think it's okay for the United States to step up. I do think it would be best, as you stated, to do a declaration of war against the drug cartels. Then they've been put on notice.
Well, the trouble with the Monroe Doctrine, of course, is that it was just a doctrine saying hands off our hemisphere. And of course, the communists have violated it for years now. It is not a justification for going to war. It is a justification for sanctions. It's a justification for diplomacy and other things, but you have to actually attack the United States to go to war. And the drug cartels do attack people within the United States. They are armed, and drug offenses are themselves not deadly, but when they're backed up by armed forces and by killing people that the cartels do, then that's justification for going to war against them. I think they do need to be eliminated.
Well, when you have fentanyl, you have children that can just get a few granulars of fentanyl and die, which has happened at playgrounds. To me, it becomes a whole new ball game at that point in time. Let's see. The next topic: downplaying the Chinese, the downplaying the Chinese threat, and so there's two thoughts that are going through my head. I'm hearing on a regular basis people talking about Israel, or we're focused on Russia and Ukraine, and I'm going. I think the biggest threat and the biggest concern right now is China. They've got the economic ability, they've got the manpower, and because of all those things that are going on, nothing's being said. We know that the Chinese are putting, they're willing to put their operatives. I think it was Fang Fang and the congressman's office. So the bottom line is they're spying, and then they launched the balloon over the United States. I mean, they are a actor that is coming for us, in my opinion, and they're who I'm concerned about, because, as you say, the left is doing nothing to talk about them, and we've got hundreds of thousands of students here in the United States, and Donald Trump says we're going to keep them.
Not only keep them, we're going to double it. Let them have 600,000. Right now it's 300 and some thousand. 600,000 Chinese student spies in the United States. Donald Trump is a fool. I like what he's done in terms of DEI and changing that aspect, but on foreign policy, he's an outright fool. He still thinks that Kim Jong-un is a wonderful person and that Xi Jinping is a good friend. He likes Vladimir Putin. No matter what Vladimir Putin does, Trump is desperate to be right and to justify his idiotic playing up to these dictators around the world. Now, you have to wait, of course, until there's a sufficient provocation to go to war with China. And China's going to be very smart about this. They're not going to go to war with Taiwan, which I think is the trigger event for World War III, until they're ready. And believe me, they've got shipbuilding capacity at least 10 to 20 times more than the United States. And they are building a huge navy, and it's pretty sophisticated. Now, they've never been tested in battle, but this attack between Pakistan using Chinese equipment on the Indians should give us a wake-up call in the military. The Chinese coming up very, very closely in terms of first-rate capability. So I am worried about it, and I think we need to cut off all trade with China and get used to, unfortunately, the higher prices. One of the reasons why the establishment, gave China access to our markets was, of course, because the globalists like Henry Kissinger, who facilitated all this, wanted to build an enemy capable of bringing Third World War to us. But the other thing was to hide inflation, because we've been experiencing really 7 to 9% inflation for the last 20 years. But because of cheap Chinese imports, it has kept prices down and it's masked the effects of inflation, so that the CPI could be, manipulated downward to 2 to 3%, when in fact the real consumer price index should be 7 to 9%.
So the headline is downplaying the Chinese threat. In what way is it being down?
Well, that's been the Department of Defense, and there's still a lot of holdovers in the Department of Defense, especially the ones that do the statistics, to keep downplaying China's nuclear missiles. And they keep, they've said for years, past 10 years, that China only has 300 nuclear warheads. Of course, all this stuff is underground and secret. I'm sure they have some spies within China. But you have to look at the number of missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles. They have the capability to MIRV their missiles, meaning more than one warhead on the missiles. And when you've got 500 missiles with 3 hit warheads each, that means you've got to have at least 1,500 warheads, not 300. And so 4 or 5 years later, they up it to 500. But by this time, their missile count's up to 2,000. You see, they keep downplaying this, and they refuse to take the connection that most people in intelligence do of the amount of missiles you've got. Standing missiles means you've got at least 3 times that many warheads. And they're not doing it. They keep downplaying the China threat.
What did we learn from the military parade in China?
Well, they showed off a lot of their newest weaponry, including fighter jets, including stealth fighters. We don't know how stealthy they are until you get a radar signature on them. But of course, they showed the new DF-61 intercontinental ballistic missile, which can reach anywhere in the world, the DF-41. They showed several other new missiles that are shorter and medium range missiles and with hypersonic warheads. All of that was on display. And the Chinese have often disguised regular missiles as new missiles, and sometimes they're just shells. But our military intelligence is very, very worried about what was paraded before the world. China's getting close to being ready to strike the West.
Okay, so what is the difference between an intercontinental ballistic missile and a hypersonic missile?
Well, hypersonic missiles are generally, you see, even intercontinental ballistic are hypersonic when they're re-entering the atmosphere. All of the warheads go hypersonic because of the downward trajectory and the speed that they reach. But hypersonic now is considered 5 times the speed of the sound or greater. And warheads can reach 3 to 4 times the speed of sound. These are smaller missiles are capable of hypersonic, where you go 5 times the speed of sound. Are very difficult to intercept, to get a computerized trajectory on them, especially when they become maneuvering weapons. But they tend to be smaller, medium and short-range missiles, especially anti-ship missiles, have now become hypersonic and maneuvering, which is very, very dangerous for our aircraft carriers out there, because you could throw 100 missiles and you're not going to shoot all of them down. But they will be medium and short range missiles.
So I heard. I'm trying to remember if I read it or heard it, that the aircraft carrier has become now what the battleships were at the beginning of World War II.
You mean obsolete?
Yes.
Well, there's no way to project power like an aircraft carrier in terms of projecting power. And even China, by the way, is building aircraft carriers. So they're not obsolete. They are vulnerable more and more unless we get better and better protection for them. I really fear that we'll lose some aircraft. Now, remember, it takes a lot of missile hits to actually bring down an aircraft carrier because you've got to hit it below the water line, and that's why torpedoes are so effective. And then they're compartmentalized, so you've got to have at least 3 or 4 torpedoes hit it to seriously damage or threaten an aircraft carrier with sinking. They're a floating island, and unfortunately, we have about 5,000 people on an aircraft carrier, so they're really highly at risk. But yes, our aircraft carriers are vulnerable.
Do you know how many aircraft carriers we have?
I think there's 11 right now.
Okay. So we have the concern that we have to worry about when it comes to China. We're worried, the bottom line is they have more soldiers than we do. So we've got that we need to be concerned with. I believe they have surpassed the United States in ships.
That's right. They're
And
the largest navy in the world.
and okay, so let's say that the United States ships are 2 to 1 better. They're still out producing this at such a rate that in not too long, within a couple of years, they're going to have so many more ships than the United States does that they're going to win that battle too. So, at what point do you think they can project? So, if I remember correctly, you said, is Taiwan the event that you think will start World War III?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I think that's the trigger event. And the reason is not just because of the attack on Taiwan. The reason is that we will attempt to intervene. It didn't used to be our doctrine to intervene. Now it is. So the doctrine has changed. We will intervene. I happen to know from my military sources that the U.S. military is actively preparing to counter a Taiwanese invasion of Taiwan. Now, North Korea is the key to this trigger event to World War III because they have vowed that if we do intervene with China, that they will attack U.S. forces in Korea and Guam and maybe Hawaii with missiles. Now, if they do that, we have to respond, and probably with nuclear weapons as well towards North Korea. And that will bring in China, who has an alliance with North Korea. In other words, North Korea will use their defensive pact with or China will use their defensive pact to then launch a preemptive strike along with Russia against U.S. military targets. And I don't think it'll be an attack on cities on the first strike, just military targets.
Do you think that China and Russia want to get boots on the ground here in the United States?
I think they would be very reluctant to do so. They want to use a preemptive nuclear strike against U.S. military targets. That means all our missiles would be gone, all our major military bases would be hit, because they want to blackmail the West into submission. They don't want to destroy the infrastructure of the city. They want to take the land. As General Hao Tian, Deputy Defense Minister of China, said in 2011, that we need Lebensraum, we need living space, we need agricultural space. We can't feed our people. And that's why they want North America. They want the U.S. and Canada for the growing potential there. And they don't want to destroy the economies. They want to take over them. And a lot of naive people have said, well, China won't attack the United States because they depend on us for their business. Well, that no longer applies if you blackmail the U.S. into letting China control us. They want a new world order too, but under Chinese control. They want to preserve the economies in the West, but under their control. And that's what a nuclear first strike on military targets does. Now, our own leaders want that strike because that's the only way to drive Americans into a global militarized new world order, a global government, is to allow our military to be hit by the Chinese and then to come out of their bunkers and say, we didn't know this was going to happen, but now the only way we have to defend ourselves is to join in a militarized global government. Nothing else will do it. COVID wouldn't do it. There's nothing else that'll get Americans or even British back into an EU-style control everything regulatory nightmare that a global government is, except war.
Who do you think will wind up winning between? So they attack the United States, then it's Russia against China. Who comes out on top, do you think?
No, I just don't think anybody survives the war. I think it's so bad in terms of hit and counter hit, and that I don't think we recover after this war. I don't think we'll ever see a World Economic Forum AI robotic society because there'll be EMP weapons. There won't be any electricity for a while. People in cryptos are going to lose everything because the internet will be down. So, and they say, well, the internet won't be down everywhere in the world. Yeah, but how do you get access to it if it's down in the United States? There's no way to communicate with countries that have an internet still running. But in any case, I think personally that because of the moral corruption within the West and within the East, I mean, China's a very corrupt hierarchical society. So is Russia, very corrupt. And the United States and the West is corrupt morally, etc. I just don't think we have the moral certitude and the lack of moral ambivalence to be able to come back and rebuild. It won't be like World War II where you rebuild and come back stronger. I think we get into internecine warfare, evil striking against evil. And I think you look at the increase in road rage in the United States, and subways aren't safe, etc. Think what happens when there's no electricity. There's an excuse to pillage everywhere, and there's going to be so much hatred involved with people against people. That's why I wrote strategic relocation. You got to be prepared to get out of the big cities. You've got to get rural. That's the only way you're going to survive. The people are better in rural areas, and they can grow things in rural areas.
Okay, we're at 6:00. Do you want to hit real quickly the war for and against mRNA vaccines, or do we want to save that
Let's
for
save that for next time, because my next World Affairs brief next week is going to be on RFK's tremendous interview or hearing before the Senate, how he, except for saying that we need to have vaccines at the end of the thing, I mean, he knows that's untrue. He's made the statement that there's no way to mass produce a safe vaccine, and he's absolutely right. But I'm going to cover that in Friday's World Affairs brief, the war against mRNA, and it's going to be with us for a long while still. So we'll cover that next time.
Excellent. Joel, thank you so much for joining us here on KMMU, Main Street Media, Utah, and on Talk with Jon. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here every Tuesday or second Tuesday of the month. We're truly grateful for you to come in on and joining me. Thank you, Joel.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.
All right. Folks, this has been Talk with Jon. We want to say thank you to Joel Skousen. We want to say thank you to Michael Letts. And I want to say thank you to my producer, Dwayne,